Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched the massive alien station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Prime looked like a giant metal flower floating in space with petals made of gleaming silver and gold. He had dreamed of this moment since he was a boy reading about space exploration. But now that first contact was really happening, his stomach felt tight with worry. The Discovery had been traveling for 3 months to reach this meeting point after Earth received the first alien message in human history. The message was simple but changed everything for humanity. It said that the Zephyrian Alliance wanted to meet the new species that had just discovered faster than light travel. Jake knew that what happened in the next few days would decide the future of every person on Earth. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked onto the bridge wearing her best diplomatic uniform. She looked calm, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. Behind her came Dr. Kevin Hayes carrying a large case full of scientific equipment and medical scanners. The plan was simple. They would dock with Nexus Prime and spend 1 week learning about each other. If things went well, humans might be invited to join the Zephyrian Alliance. The communications officer, Lisa Bennett, turned from her station and spoke to Jake. "The aliens are sending us docking instructions, Captain. They want us to use Bay 7 on the lower ring." Jake nodded and ordered the pilot to follow the alien directions. As they got closer to the station, Jake could see other ships docked at various ports. Some looked like smooth eggs, while others had sharp angles like crystals. None of them looked anything like human ships. The docking process went smoothly, and soon Jake found himself walking through an airlock into the alien station. The first thing he noticed was the air tasted different. It was clean but had a slight metallic flavor that made his nose tingle. The walls were covered in patterns that seemed to move when he looked at them directly, but stayed still when he looked away. A group of aliens waited for them in the docking bay. Jake had seen pictures from the probe data, but meeting them in person was still shocking. The Zephyrians stood about 7 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly. They had 4 arms and large black eyes that took up most of their face. Their leader stepped forward and spoke in perfect English through a small device attached to its throat. "Welcome, humans. I am Velthara, and I speak for the Alliance Council. We are pleased to finally meet your species." The alien voice sounded like wind chimes, mixed with the hum of electricity. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but forced himself to smile and extend his hand for a handshake. Velthara looked at his hand for a moment, then carefully reached out with one of its 4 arms to touch Jake's palm. Ambassador Carter stepped forward and began the formal greeting that had been practiced hundreds of times on Earth. She thanked the Alliance for the invitation and expressed humanity's hope for peaceful relations. Velthara listened carefully, then led the group deeper into the station through corridors that seemed to glow with their own light. The meeting room was circular with no chairs, but instead had shaped platforms that adjusted to fit whoever sat on them. Jake found his platform surprisingly comfortable as it molded itself to support his human body shape. Around the room, other aliens sat on similar platforms. Dr. Hayes whispered to Jake that he could see at least 4 different species represented. In the group, Velthara began explaining the Alliance and its history. 7 different species had joined together over thousands of years to explore space and share knowledge. They had rules about not interfering with younger species until those species developed faster than light travel on their own. Humans had reached that milestone, so now they could be considered for membership. The aliens asked many questions about human biology and culture. Dr. Hayes answered most of the technical questions, while Ambassador Carter handled the political ones. Jake noticed that the aliens seemed particularly interested in human emotions and how humans expressed feelings. They asked detailed questions about crying and what it meant when humans produced water from their eyes. The meeting continued for several hours with both sides sharing information. Jake began to feel more relaxed as the aliens seemed genuinely friendly and curious rather than hostile. They showed holographic displays of their home worlds and described their technologies. In return, the humans shared videos and data about Earth and human civilization. As the formal session was ending, Velthara announced that there would be a cultural exchange ceremony the next day. Each species would demonstrate something unique about their culture, and humans were invited to participate. Jake felt hopeful that things were going well when young engineer Amy Foster raised her hand to ask about the ceremony. Amy had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now she wanted to know what humans should bring to share. Velthara explained that each species would present a traditional item that represented their values. Amy smiled and said she had brought something special from Earth that would be perfect for the ceremony. The first day of contact ended with both sides expressing satisfaction with the initial meetings. Jake returned to the Discovery feeling cautiously optimistic about humanity's future among the stars. The cultural exchange ceremony took place in the largest chamber on Nexus Prime. The room had a high domed ceiling covered in stars that seemed to move and dance in patterns Jake had never seen before. Representatives from all 7 Alliance species gathered in a circle with the humans positioned between the Zephyrians and a group of tall crystal beings called the Kaleri. Each species had brought something meaningful to share. The Zephyrians presented a singing crystal that produced beautiful melodies when touched. The Kaleri demonstrated how they could change the color of their crystalline bodies to create art. Other species showed tools and devices that represented their greatest achievements. Jake watched in amazement as technologies beyond human understanding were displayed casually like simple gifts. When it came time for the human presentation, Amy Foster stepped forward carrying an ornate wooden box. She had explained to Jake earlier that the box contained a ceremonial blade that had been in her family for generations. It was made by her great-grandfather who had been a blacksmith and represented human craftsmanship and tradition. Amy planned to explain how humans valued items that connected them to their ancestors. Amy opened the box and carefully lifted out the blade. The metal gleamed under the strange alien lighting, and several of the alien observers leaned forward. To get a better look, she began explaining the history of the blade and how her family had passed it down through 5 generations. The aliens listened intently as she described human traditions around family and inheritance. VE Elthara asked if they could examine the blade more closely, and Amy nodded. She carefully passed the weapon to the Zephyrian leader, who held it with 2 of its forearms. The blade was heavier than Velthara expected, and as it tried to adjust its grip, the sharp edge sliced across Amy's outstretched palm. The cut was not deep, but it was enough to draw blood and cause Amy to gasp in pain. She pulled her hand back and looked at the thin red line across her palm. The pain was sharp but not terrible, and she tried to smile to show that she was not seriously hurt. She did not want to ruin the ceremony over such a small accident, but as Amy looked at her injured hand, she felt tears begin to form in her eyes. The pain combined with embarrassment and worry about the ceremony caused her emotions to overflow. Clear drops rolled down her cheeks as she tried to blink back the rest. She quickly wiped her face with her other hand and started to apologize. For the disruption, the reaction from the aliens was immediate and terrifying. Every single alien in the room froze in place as if they had been turned to stone, their large eyes fixed on Amy's face with expressions that Jake could only describe as pure terror. The Kaleri began making high-pitched sounds that hurt human ears, while the Zephyrians backed away from Amy as if she had become radioactive. VE Thora dropped the ceremonial blade and began speaking rapidly in its own language to the other Alliance members. Jake could not understand the words, but the tone was clearly one of panic and fear. Dr. Hayes reached for his medical scanner to check on Amy, but several aliens immediately moved to block his path while making threatening gestures. Ambassador Carter tried to restore calm by speaking in a soothing voice, but none of the aliens seemed to hear her. They were all focused on Amy, who stood in the center of the room looking confused and frightened. More tears began to flow as she realized that something was terribly wrong, but she did not understand what she had done to cause such a reaction. Jake stepped forward and positioned himself between Amy and the aliens. His training kicked in, and he began evaluating the situation for potential threats. The aliens were clearly agitated, but they did not seem to be preparing to attack. Instead, they appeared to be afraid of Amy herself, which made no sense to him at all. VE Elthara finally managed to regain enough composure to speak in English again. The ceremony must end immediately. All humans must return to your ship while we discuss this development. The Alliance Council requires emergency consultation before we can continue any interactions. Jake wanted to demand an explanation, but the fear in the alien leader's voice convinced him that arguing would be a mistake. The humans were escorted back to the docking bay by a group of heavily armed alien guards. Amy kept apologizing and asking what she had done wrong, but none of the aliens would answer her questions. Jake noticed that the guards stayed as far away from Amy as possible while still maintaining their protective formation around the group. Once they were safely aboard the Discovery, Jake called an emergency meeting in the briefing room. Amy sat at the table still holding a bandage over her cut palm while Dr. Hayes ran medical scans to make sure she was not seriously injured. Ambassador Carter paced back and forth trying to understand what had gone wrong with the ceremony. The communications officer Lisa Bennett reported that she was picking up intense communication traffic between Nexus Prime and other Alliance facilities. The messages were all encrypted, but the volume suggested that news of the incident was spreading rapidly throughout Alliance space. Jake realized that whatever had happened was being treated as a major crisis rather than a simple cultural misunderstanding. Hayes finished his examination of Amy and confirmed that her injury was minor and would heal completely within a few days. But he also noticed something strange in his scanner readings. The tears that Amy had shed showed unusual quantum signatures that his equipment could barely detect. The molecular structure of human tears appeared to be far more complex than anyone had previously realized. Jake ordered the crew to remain on high alert while they waited for word from the Alliance. He had a growing feeling that Amy's tears had triggered something much larger than a diplomatic incident. The way the aliens had reacted suggested that they recognized something about human crying that humans themselves did not understand. Hours passed before Velthra finally contacted the Discovery with a request for a private meeting between only Jake and the Alliance leadership. No other humans would be allowed to participate, and especially not Amy. Jake agreed to the meeting but insisted that Ambassador Carter be included since she was the official diplomatic representative. As Jake prepared for what might be the most important conversation in human history, he wondered what ancient secrets were about to be revealed about his own species. Jake and Ambassador Carter sat across from Velthra in a small private chamber deep inside Nexus Prime. The room felt heavy with tension, and the alien leader looked as if it had not rested since the incident with Amy. Two other Alliance members sat silently in the background, but Velthara did all the talking. "Your species presents us with a terrible dilemma, Captain Morrison." Velthara began speaking slowly, as if each word was difficult to say. "We have spent the last day consulting our oldest records and seeking guidance from the wisest members of our Alliance. What we have discovered fills us with great concern about the future of this galaxy." Ambassador Carter leaned forward and asked what they had done wrong. She explained that crying was a natural human response to pain or strong emotions, and that Amy had meant no harm to anyone. The tears was simply salt water produced by human tear ducts, and had no special properties or dangerous effects. Velthara made a sound that might have been alien laughter, but there was no humor in it. "You speak of your tears as if they are simple biological functions, but our records tell a very different story. The Alliance has existed for over 40,000 years, and in all that time we have encountered only one other species that could produce emotional secretions like your tears." The alien leader activated a holographic display that showed ancient symbols and text in various alien languages. "These are the oldest records in Alliance archives. They speak of a species we called the Water Weavers, who ruled a vast empire long before any of our current member species had developed space travel. The Water Weavers were powerful beyond imagination, and their tears could reshape reality itself." Jake studied the holographic symbols, but could not understand any of the writing. He asked Velthora to explain what had happened to these Water Weavers, and why the Alliance was so concerned about human tears. The alien leader touched the display and new images appeared, showing star charts and battle formations. The Water Weavers vanished from the galaxy approximately 50,000 years ago. Velthara explained that official records claimed they had transcended to a higher plane of existence, but older, unofficial sources told a different story. Some texts suggested that the Water Weavers had been destroyed by younger species who feared their power and could not understand their peaceful nature. Ambassador Carter asked how this ancient history related to modern humans. She pointed out that human tears had never shown any unusual properties, and that Earth science had studied them extensively. There was nothing in human knowledge that suggested tears could affect reality, or pose any threat to other species. Dr. Hayes had remained on the Discovery, but he was monitoring the conversation through a secure communication link. His voice came through the speakers as he reported the results of his analysis of Amy's tears from the ceremony. The quantum signatures he had detected were indeed unusual, but he could not determine what they might mean without more advanced equipment. Velthara explained that the Alliance had developed highly sensitive detection systems specifically designed to identify Water Weaver technology and energy signatures. When Amy had cried during the ceremony, those systems had immediately triggered emergency alerts throughout Nexus Prime. The quantum patterns in her tears matched the ancient records almost perfectly. The implications were staggering for both species. If humans were somehow related to the legendary Water Weavers, then their tears might indeed possess powers that humanity had never discovered. But if the Alliance believed humans were a threat, then the peaceful first contact could quickly turn into a war that humanity could not possibly win. Jake asked what the Alliance intended to do with this information. He pointed out that humans had come to Nexus Prime seeking friendship and cooperation, not conquest or conflict. Even if human tears did have some unknown properties, that did not mean humans would use them as weapons against other species. The problem is not what humans intend to do now, Velthara replied sadly. The problem is what other species will do when they learn that the Water Weavers have returned. Fear of that ancient power runs deep in Alliance culture, and many of our member species would demand immediate action to prevent another tier war. Ambassador Carter asked about this tier war and what it had involved. Velthara explained that, according to the oldest records, the final conflict between the Water Weavers and the younger species had lasted for centuries, and devastated entire star systems. Whole planets had been rendered uninhabitable, and several species had been driven to extinction before the Water Weavers finally disappeared. Jake began to understand the magnitude of the problem facing humanity. Even if humans had no intention of using their tears as weapons, the mere possibility that they could do so would terrify other species. The Alliance might decide that the safest course of action would be to quarantine Earth permanently, or even worse. Dr. Hayes reported that he had been analyzing the historical data that Velthara had shared and found some interesting patterns. The quantum signatures associated with Water Weaver tears appeared to be triggered by strong emotional states rather than conscious control. This suggested that the power was involuntary and tied to the species' natural emotional responses. This discovery might actually make the situation worse rather than better. If humans could not control when their tears became powerful, then they represented an unpredictable threat that could activate at any time. Other species would have no way to know when a crying human might accidentally trigger some kind of reality-altering effect. Velthara admitted that the Alliance Council was deeply divided about how to respond to the human situation. Some members wanted to welcome humans as the rightful heirs of the Water Weavers, while others demanded immediate isolation or elimination of the potential threat. The debate had been raging for hours, with no clear resolution in sight. Jake realized that time was running out for peaceful solutions. He asked Velthara how long the Alliance would take to reach a decision and what options might exist for avoiding conflict. The alien leader explained that military forces were already being positioned near human space as a precautionary measure while the Council continued its deliberations. Ambassador Carter made one final plea for understanding and patience. She argued that humans deserved a chance to prove their peaceful intentions, and that judging them based on ancient history would be unfair to both species. Humanity had never used tears as weapons because they had never known such a thing was possible. Velthara seemed genuinely sympathetic to the human position, but explained that fear was a powerful force in Alliance politics. Many species remembered the stories of the tier wars and would not be willing to take risks with their own survival. The Alliance had maintained peace for thousands of years by avoiding exactly this kind of dangerous uncertainty. As the meeting ended, Jake knew that humanity faced its greatest crisis in history, and the solution would require more than just diplomacy and good intentions. Jake returned to the Discovery with a heavy heart and immediately called a meeting with his senior staff. He explained the situation as clearly as he could, while trying not to panic the crew. Humanity was being compared to an ancient species that had been destroyed out of fear, and the Alliance was debating whether humans represented a similar threat that needed to be eliminated. Dr. Hayes had spent the time during Jake's meeting running every test he could think of on samples of human tears. He had collected samples from several crew members by showing them sad videos and asking them to think about difficult memories. The results were consistent and disturbing. Every human tear sample showed the same quantum signatures that had triggered the alien detection systems. Engineer Tony Richards volunteered to help with the testing, even though he found it embarrassing to cry on command. He was a tough man who rarely showed emotion, but he managed to produce tears by thinking about his wife and newborn daughter back on Earth. Dr. Hayes was amazed to discover that tears of joy showed different quantum patterns than tears of sadness or pain. The ship communications officer Lisa Bennett reported that she was detecting increased military activity throughout Alliance space. Ships were moving toward human territory and encrypted messages were being sent between Alliance military commanders. It appeared that preparations for some kind of action against Earth were already underway, regardless of what the Council decided. Amy Foster had been confined to her quarters since the incident, but Jake decided she needed to know what was happening. When he explained that her tears had somehow identified humans as descendants of a powerful ancient species, Amy broke down crying again. This time Dr. Hayes was ready with his scanners and he detected energy spikes that seemed to affect nearby electronic equipment. The ship's medic, Claire Davis, pointed out that humans cried for many different reasons beyond just pain and sadness. People cried when they were happy or proud or even angry. She wondered if different types of tears might have different effects on the quantum level. Dr. Hayes agreed to expand his testing to cover the full range of human emotional responses. Meanwhile, Ambassador Carter was working with the Discovery diplomatic team to prepare arguments for humanity case. They needed to convince the Alliance that humans could be trusted with whatever power their tears might possess. The problem was that humans themselves did not understand that power, or how to control it, which made promises about responsible use difficult to make. Jake was reviewing military reports when the ship power systems suddenly fluctuated. Engineer Tony Richards called from the engine room to report that the main reactor was showing instability in its control crystals. The quantum field generators that regulated the faster-than-light drive were producing irregular energy patterns that could lead to a catastrophic failure. The timing could not have been worse. If the Discovery lost power while docked at Nexus Prime, the aliens might interpret it as some kind of attack or threat. Jake ordered all non-essential systems shut down while Tony and his team worked to stabilize the reactor. The engineer reported that the control crystals seemed to be resonating at frequencies that were interfering with normal operations. Dr. Hayes suggested that the quantum effects from their tear testing might somehow be affecting the ship's systems. He had noticed that his scanners were producing unusual readings whenever they were used near areas where humans had been crying. The molecular changes in human tears might be creating energy fields that could influence sensitive equipment. Amy Foster insisted on helping with the reactor repairs, despite being ordered to stay in her quarters. She argued that since her tears had started this crisis, she should be allowed to help solve it. Jake reluctantly agreed, but ordered Dr. Hayes to monitor her constantly for any signs of emotional distress that might make the situation worse. The engine room was filled with flashing warning lights and the hum of overworked equipment. Tony Richards was covered in sweat as he tried to manually adjust the crystal alignments while his team worked to reroute power through backup systems. The reactor core was running dangerously hot, and they had maybe an hour before a complete shutdown would be necessary. Amy stood watching the repair work while trying to stay out of the way. She felt terrible guilt about causing problems for the entire crew and potentially for all of humanity. The stress of the situation, combined with her natural empathy for the struggling engineers, finally overwhelmed her. Emotional control, and tears began flowing down her cheeks. Dr. Hayes immediately detected quantum field fluctuations as Amy's tears began to fall. But instead of making the situation worse, something incredible happened. As her tears hit the deck near the damaged control crystals, the crystals began resonating at perfect harmonic frequencies. The irregular energy patterns smoothed out and the reactor temperature started dropping toward normal levels. Tony Richards stopped his manual adjustments and stared at the control readouts in amazement. The quantum field generators were now producing the most stable energy patterns he had ever seen. The faster-than-light drive was operating at efficiency levels that exceeded normal specifications. Somehow, Amy's tears had fixed the problem instead of making it worse. Dr. Hayes quickly moved his scanners closer to the area where Amy's tears had fallen and recorded energy readings that defied current understanding of physics. The salt and proteins in human tears were creating quantum resonance effects that could actually repair and enhance certain types of technology. This was not destruction but creation, an improvement of existing systems. Jake realized that they had just discovered something that could change everything about the situation with the Alliance. Human tears were not weapons of mass destruction but tools of creation and healing. The ancient water weavers might not have been destroyed because they were dangerous, but because their power was so beneficial that other species wanted to control or eliminate the competition. Amy wiped her face and asked if she had made things worse again. Tony Richards laughed and told her that she had just saved the ship and possibly all their lives. The reactor was now running better than it had since leaving Earth, and the faster-than-light drive was operating at peak efficiency. Her tears had been exactly what the damaged systems needed. Dr. Hayes was already planning new experiments to test the healing properties of human tears on different types of technology and materials. If they could understand and demonstrate the beneficial effects, then maybe the Alliance would see humans as valuable partners rather than dangerous threats. The key would be showing that human tears created rather than destroyed. But Jake knew they were running out of time. The Alliance military forces were getting closer to Earth, and the Council was still debating humanity's fate. They needed to act quickly to show the aliens that human tears were a gift to the galaxy rather than a curse from the past. Jake knew he had to act fast before the Alliance made a decision that could doom humanity. He requested an emergency meeting with the full Alliance Council to present new evidence about human tears and their true nature. Velthera was reluctant to arrange another meeting so soon, but agreed when Jake explained that they had made important discoveries that could change everything. The council chamber was larger than any room Jake had ever seen, with representatives from dozens of species, arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, and Jake could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching his every move. Ambassador Carter stood beside him, trying to project confidence despite the overwhelming odds they faced. Dr. Hayes had prepared a detailed presentation showing the quantum analysis of different types of human tears and their effects on various materials and technologies. He planned to demonstrate that human tears were tools of creation and healing rather than destruction and death. The key was convincing species that had feared the water weavers for 50,000 years to change their fundamental beliefs. Zixandra dominated one section of the chamber with its massive form and battle-scarred armor. This was the Alliance military commander who had been pushing for immediate action against Earth. Jake could see hatred and suspicion in the alien warrior's eyes as it watched the human delegation take their positions on the central platform. VE called the emergency session to order and explained that the humans had requested permission to present new evidence about their species' capabilities. Several Alliance members immediately objected that they had heard enough from the potential waterweaver descendants. The debate that followed was heated, with multiple species arguing simultaneously in languages Jake could not understand. Finally, the Alliance Prime Council voted to allow the human presentation, but with strict time limits and security restrictions. Jake would have exactly 1 hour to make humanity case before the Council would proceed to final deliberations about Earth fate. Armed guards positioned themselves around the chamber, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Ambassador Carter began the presentation by acknowledging Alliance concerns about human tears and their resemblance to ancient waterweaver abilities. She explained that humanity had never known about these connections and had always considered tears to be simple biological responses to emotion. Humans had no desire to threaten or harm any other species in the galaxy. Dr. Hayes then activated his holographic displays showing the quantum analysis data from their recent experiments. He demonstrated how different types of human tears produced different energy signatures and effects. Tears of sadness and pain created resonance patterns that could repair damaged crystalline structures, while tears of joy enhanced energy efficiency. In quantum systems, the reaction from the Alliance Council was mixed, with some species showing interest in the scientific data while others remained skeptical and fearful. War Speaker Zixandra interrupted the presentation to demand proof that humans could control these abilities and prevent them from being used as weapons. The military commander clearly did not trust any species that possessed such potentially dangerous powers. Jake made a decision that he knew was risky but felt was necessary to save his species. He asked Amy Foster to join them on the platform. Despite the dangers of exposing her to more alien scrutiny, Amy was terrified but agreed to help demonstrate the beneficial nature of human tears for the Alliance Council. Dr. Hayes had prepared several damaged alien technology samples for the demonstration. These included broken communication devices, depleted energy cells, and fractured crystal components from various Alliance species. The plan was to show that Amy's tears could repair and improve these items rather than destroy them. Amy stood in the center of the platform, feeling overwhelmed by the hundreds of alien beings watching her every move. Jake encouraged her to think about positive memories and emotions to produce tears of joy rather than fear or sadness. She closed her eyes and thought about her family back on Earth and her dreams of exploring the stars with friendly alien species. Tears began flowing down Amy's cheeks as she remembered her father's pride when she graduated from the Space Academy and her mother's tears of joy at the graduation ceremony. Dr. Hayes carefully collected the tears and applied them to the damaged alien technology samples while his scanners recorded every quantum fluctuation and energy change. The results were immediate and dramatic. The broken communication devices began functioning perfectly with enhanced signal clarity and range. The depleted energy cells recharged themselves to levels higher than their original specifications. The fractured crystal components fused back together and began glowing with increased luminosity and efficiency. Several Alliance Council members moved closer to examine the repaired technology, while others began talking excitedly among themselves. Even War Speaker's Exandra seemed impressed by the demonstration, though the military commander remained suspicious of human motives. Velthara asked Dr. Hayes to explain exactly how human tears were able to produce these miraculous effects. Dr. Hayes presented his theory that human tears contained unique quantum markers that could resonate with crystalline and energy-based technologies. The salt proteins and emotional biomarkers created harmonic frequencies that enhanced rather than disrupted alien systems. This was fundamentally different from weapons technology, which was designed to destroy rather than improve. But the demonstration took an unexpected turn when Amy began crying tears of frustration and fear about humanity's situation. These different tears produced entirely different quantum effects that caused some of the nearby alien equipment to malfunction and shut down. The contrast between healing tears and potentially harmful tears made the situation more complex than anyone had anticipated. War Speaker's Exandra immediately pointed to the equipment failures as proof that human tears were indeed dangerous weapons that could not be controlled. The military commander argued that any species capable of both healing and harming through involuntary emotional responses represented an unacceptable risk to Alliance security and stability. Ambassador Carter tried to explain that Amy was under tremendous stress and that her emotional state was not representative of normal human behavior. She argued that with proper understanding and cooperation, humans could learn to manage their abilities responsibly. But several council members were clearly concerned about the unpredictable nature of emotionally triggered powers. Dr. Hayes quickly analyzed the quantum patterns from Amy's different tears and discovered something important. The harmful effects only occurred when humans were experiencing extreme negative emotions like terror or despair. Normal sadness and even moderate fear produced the beneficial healing effects they had demonstrated earlier. Jake realized that the key to saving humanity might be showing the Alliance that human emotions could be understood and managed through friendship and cooperation rather than fear and isolation. If aliens continued to treat humans as threats, then negative emotions would dominate and create the very problems they were trying to prevent. The council session was reaching its climax, and Jake knew that the next few minutes would determine whether humanity would be welcomed into the galactic community or destroyed as too dangerous to exist. Jake stepped forward and asked the Alliance Council for permission to speak directly about what they had all witnessed. He knew this was his last chance to save not just the crew of the Discovery, but every human being on Earth. The chamber fell, silent as hundreds of alien beings focused their attention on the human captains standing alone on the central platform. You have seen that human tears can both heal and harm depending on the emotions that create them. Jake began speaking slowly and clearly so that every word would be understood through the translation devices. What you have not yet understood is that this makes humans the most predictable species in the galaxy rather than the most dangerous. Our emotions are honest, and our tears cannot lie about what we truly feel. War Speaker's Exandra objected that unpredictable emotional responses made humans impossible to trust or control. The military commander argued that any species whose weapons were triggered by feelings rather than conscious choice represented a permanent threat to galactic stability. How could the Alliance make treaties or agreements with beings whose power fluctuated based on their moods and emotions? Jake had anticipated this argument and was ready with his response. He explained that human emotions were not random or mysterious, but followed clear patterns that could be understood and predicted. Humans cried healing tears when they felt love, compassion, hope, and other positive emotions. They only produced harmful tears when they experienced extreme fear, hatred, or despair. The solution is not to fear human emotions, but to ensure that humans have reasons to feel positive emotions toward the Alliance. Jake continued his argument, while looking directly at War Speaker's etc. If you treat humans as friends and partners, then their tears will heal and enhance your technology. If you treat humans as enemies and threats, then their tears will become the weapons you fear. Ambassador Carter stepped forward to support Jake's argument by pointing out that the Alliance had complete control over which type of human tears they would encounter. By choosing friendship over fear, the Alliance could ensure that humans would always be beneficial partners rather than dangerous enemies. The power was in the aliens' hands, not the humans. Dr. Hayes activated his holographic display, again to show the quantum analysis of tears from different crew members experiencing various emotions. Engineer Tony Richards had produced healing tears when thinking about his family, while Manette Claire Davis showed similar beneficial patterns when remembering patients she had saved. Only Amy, under extreme stress, had produced the harmful quantum signatures. Elthara asked for clarification about human emotional control and whether humans could consciously choose which type of tears to produce. Dr. Hayes explained that while humans could not directly control their tears, they could influence their emotions through meditation, therapy, and positive relationships. The key was creating environments where humans felt safe and valued. Jake decided to take the biggest risk of his life by making an offer that would either save humanity or doom them all. He proposed that the Alliance conduct a full-year trial period where humans would work alongside alien scientists and engineers to develop beneficial applications for tier-enhanced technology. If humans proved dangerous during this trial, then the Alliance could reconsider their decision. The proposal sparked intense debate among the council members, with some species expressing interest in the potential benefits, while others remained convinced that any risk was too great. War speakers Exandra demanded guarantees that humans could not use their abilities to sabotage Alliance systems or gain military advantages over other species. Amy Foster had been listening to the debate and finally spoke up despite her fear of making things worse. She apologized for causing the crisis, but pointed out that her tears had saved the Discovery engine when conventional repairs had failed. She offered to spend the rest of her life working with Alliance scientists to understand and develop beneficial uses for human abilities. The young engineer's offer seemed to touch something in several council members, who began viewing humans as individuals rather than abstract threats. Velthara asked Amy why she was willing to sacrifice her freedom for the sake of species she had only recently met. Her answer about wanting to build bridges between civilizations instead of walls resonated throughout the chamber. Dr. Hayes presented his final piece of evidence by showing quantum recordings from the original Water Weaver archives that Velthara had shared. By comparing the ancient patterns with modern human tear signatures, he had discovered that humans were not exactly like the Water Weavers, but rather a related species that had evolved different abilities over thousands of years. The human quantum patterns were actually more stable and predictable than the ancient Water Weaver signatures, which explained why the original species had been harder to understand and control. Humans represented an improved version of the Water Weaver gift that could be managed through emotional support and positive relationships rather than fear and isolation. Jake made his final argument by pointing out that the Alliance had a choice between repeating the mistakes of the past or learning from them. 50,000 years ago, younger species had destroyed the Water Weavers out of fear and ignorance. The Alliance now had the opportunity to embrace human abilities and create a better future for all species involved. War speaker Xandra stood up and announced that the military was prepared to accept a limited trial period under strict supervision. The commander insisted on monitoring stations throughout human space and immediate termination protocols if any signs of hostile intent were detected. But even this grudging acceptance was more than Jake had dared hope for. Elthara called for a formal vote on the human proposal, and the results were closer than expected. The motion passed by a narrow margin, with several species abstaining rather than choosing sides. Humanity had been granted a 1-year probationary membership in the Co-Alliance, with the understanding that their status would be reviewed based on their actions and cooperation. Jake felt tears of relief and joy flowing down his own cheeks as he realized that humanity had been given a chance to prove themselves among the stars. Dr. Hayes immediately began scanning Jake's tears and reported that they showed the strongest beneficial quantum patterns yet recorded. The healing energy was so powerful that several nearby alien devices began operating at enhanced efficiency levels. Amy Foster laughed through her own tears of happiness as she watched alien technology throughout the chamber begin glowing brighter and functioning better than before. The healing power of human joy was undeniable, and even the most skeptical council members could see the beneficial effects with their own eyes. Ambassador Carter formally accepted the Alliance offer on behalf of humanity and promised that Earth would honor all agreements and restrictions placed on human activities. She announced that humanity looked forward to a future of cooperation, exploration, and mutual benefit with all Alliance species. As the council session ended, Jake knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's journey among the stars. There would be challenges ahead, and not all species would immediately accept humans as equals. But for the first time since leaving Earth, Jake felt truly hopeful about the future of both humanity and the galaxy they would share with their new alien friends.